from that segment, we go right into Donny Laible's news capsule. Don, how are you?
I'm very good, Bob, and Happy New Year to everybody. I'll tell you, this is exciting. This is everybody's going to want and everybody will talk about. When you have people like superstar Billy Graham and Dr. D. David Schultz say what they said 30 years ago, you look back now and, wow, that was so ahead of its time. And this is a show that everybody's going to talk about easily.
Well, Don, when you go into your news capsule in this edition, you actually touch upon the fact that the two wrestlers had been on television before making the appearance on this show.
Yeah, and that's what got things started. And if you listen to the radio show, we'll talk about other TV appearances that may be coming up and that did come up. So it really was a snowball effect. But for them to have pretty much a microphone and to say what they wanted to say for as long as they wanted to say it on this show, the people in Stamford, Connecticut had to be cringing each time for each sentence that they were talking about.
Well, as the fans will hear, John, I have to ask you, you gave these guys a foot and they took a mile. I mean, when Schultz and Graham start talking, were you prepared for the scope of what they were about to say?
No, I was not prepared for what they were about to say. I saw the Inside Edition piece, and they went much, much further on the radio show. And quite frankly, even after the show, I remember Vince and I discussing it and how crazy it was and how fearful. It was like this was the show that each and every week when we ventured into New York City to do Pro Wrestling Spotlight after this first episode, we literally were scared because we were going into the city at night and we'd park our car and we'd be looking around as we entered the building and leave the building. Sure. And, no one is saying like Jerry McDivitt said on Dark Side, who cares about John Arezzi or whatever, who's going to threaten him. But we were airing something that was so explosive. And after the show, because Phil Muchnick was listening, and after the show, when he wrote that column that came out a few days later, I mean, we were in the middle of something that we didn't know where it was going to go. And then, of course, as a precursor, there's a little bit of a spoiler alert. In the next episode, Phil Muchnick comes on the show. So it's gonna get quite hairy.
Well, there's the thing, and for everyone listening to this particular podcast, stick around to the end. Whatever you do, stick around to the end because it is the single most jarring segment I've heard in the history of this program in the original radio show, because these fellas are going to talk about something that is so dark that, John, I don't even know what to say about it. It was just so off the scale in terms of its importance, and it was just scary.
Yeah, it was. And how do you think I felt behind the mic and listening to this? And like, do we cut this off? Do we stop it? And I couldn't. I let them go. I had to let them go.
Yeah, what a show this is, folks.
John,
but go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon what John was talking about when they would leave the studio. It was dark and whatnot. I had been to, I think, 2 shows there with you, John, and I can remember being late at night. It wasn't the most populated area. In fact, I don't remember, and I mean, it's 30 years, but I don't remember people even walking around the area where the studio was. It was very a plain setting door to go in, and the whole area there, if you let your imagination go, you really could. It could go pretty far because it wasn't very populated, and it was late at night, like you said, and
no, it was downtown. It was downtown Manhattan. Yeah, it was downtown Manhattan. It was in the middle of a business section. It was not too far from the World Trade Center, and it was an area where it wasn't where there were a ton of restaurants, or they were just businesses that operated Monday through Friday, and mostly offices. And it was desolated, and it was a little frightening.
Well, I've been a guest on a lot of radio shows, both as a musician and in my days at Peter Roy. Let me tell you something. People think that radio stations are like TV stations. They're not.
No.
Sometimes they're in sketchy areas of town. Sometimes they have antiquated equipment. So the buildings can be dilapidated. They are not glamorous at all.
And here there was no security.
Oh,
there was no security going in and out of that building. None. That was before 9/11. But a lot of years before 9/11, actually. But there was no security going in and out of that building.
And being that you had such a late time slot, that had to make it even more daunting, really.
It was. And it was kind of always an uneasy feeling. Even though it was exciting to be at that big station, it was always an uneasy feeling going in and out of there, especially after this first episode.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Before we get into the meat of the show and all the revelations you're about to hear, we do have a time capsule. So let's get to Don Laible and his news.
Don, are you there?
Yes, I am, John.
How you doing?
Very good, and a couple days late, but a happy New Year to you and to all of our new listeners on WEVD.
Well, welcome aboard.
Lots going on this week, so John, thank you, and good evening, everybody. Leading off the capsule for this week's wrestling news, former World Wrestling Federation champion superstar Billy Graham and main eventer Dr. D. David Schultz appeared this past Friday on the nationally syndicated television show Inside Edition, speaking of their experiences in using steroids with Hulk Hogan. Now, the taped interviews from both claim that the drug hasn't been a foreign substance to the Hulkster for a number of years. Graham stated to have shot up Hogan with injectable anabolic steroids on several occasions. That also according to the Wrestling Observer. And no official remarks have come down from the WWF concerning the Inside Edition piece. And the heat remains on the WWF outside of the ring. Former wrestler and color commentator on WWF television shows Jesse the Body Ventura has filed a lawsuit against his former employer for the use of his voice on videos and pay-per-views without receiving any royalties. Now, according to a report in Torch Weekly, Ventura was paid for initial airing of his work on Superstars of Wrestling and pay-per-views, but believes further use of his voice should result in reimbursement. Now, Ventura has been one of the commentators for radio broadcasts on the NFL's Minnesota Vikings games for the past 2 seasons. Well, it appears Lex Luger's days with the World Championship Wrestling are numbered. Don't expect to see the WCW Heavyweight Champion on too many arena cards, if any, this month, due to a clause in his contract that specifies he is to wrestle a specific amount of matches only in a year. In rapidly reaching that unspecified number of matches, Luger is not booked for the promotion's upcoming Clash of Champions lineup on WTBS. Lex, however, is expected to defend his title opposite Sting on February the 29th in Milwaukee. And in shocking developments, sources close to WCW claim Luger will be leaving the promotion on March 1st of this year, a year early from a contract that currently runs through 1993. The major stipulation in this, Lex cannot wrestle for a year. And speaking of WCW's Clash on January 21st coming from Topeka, Kansas, here's a rundown of the top matches. In the main event, Sting will be teaming with Ricky Steamboat opposing Rick Rude and Steve Austin. In 6-man tag action, it will be the trio of Dustin Rhodes, Barry Windham, and Ron Simmons taking on Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko, and Bobby Eaton. The Steiner brothers are challenged by Big Van Vader and Mr. Hughes, plus Cactus Jack and Van Hammer are scheduled to lock holds on the card. And finally, load up your video recorder, set the timer for January the 14th at 4 p.m. On the ESPN airing of Global Wrestling Federation that day, the 2 out of 3 falls title match has the Lightning Kid defending his light heavyweight belt with Jerry Lynn in Dallas's Global Dome. It is said to be a 4-star confrontation. The match was held on December 27th. Spotlight capsule time, 11:26.
You know, in most eras, you would run down the matches and the cards, and that would be the meat of a show. But 1991 wasn't like that, was it, John?
No, it wasn't. It certainly wasn't. But in this particular debut episode, and Donnie, I mean, it was almost like we all kind of stepped up our game, because your capsule, your time capsule, your news capsule from 30 years ago was the news, hard hitting. It was succinct. It was well put together. And I think in your voice, I heard the excitement of being in a much larger platform than typically we had done in the past.
Sure, it was it's about the business. It took away the something that was kayfabe all along to now we're behind the curtain and airing everything out. And oh yeah, by the way, there are some matches coming up, but here you have a audience, and everybody's going to find out some news today on this show that nobody else has. That's exciting. We've got shows coming up, but we have things like with Jesse. The behind scenes business was getting more attention. And that was exciting for me because for so long I wanted to talk about things like that. But, coming from an era where you do that in public, this was something new. And, I couldn't wait to jump into it.
Yeah, I mean, not only the Schultz and Graham appearance on Inside Edition, but the Jesse the Body Ventura lawsuit against the WWF, those were big news. And you could almost hear Titan Towers in Connecticut. You can almost hear like the walls beginning to rattle there a little bit because this show was listened to, and it was listened to on this evening, and it was listened to in the following week with Muchnick, and it was listened to every week. And from what I understand, Howard Finkel would give a report on what was said on the show each and every week. Maybe he was assigned to listen to it. But yeah, we were in an era that now we weren't a little well-kept secret like we were on Long Island with a lot of hardcore fans. Now we were in the media capital of the world being listened to by guys like Muchnick, guys like Bob Raceman of the Daily News, and so many others. And this is where, through the exposure on this show, people came into my life that, ultimately changed it because they were able to listen to this program. So I'm kind of excited about what's in the future. And Donnie, I think the first time capsule covering WEVD was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and one thing for me personally, by you getting to know Billy Graham more, having him come to your convention was for me the highlight, to be around Graham. And I remember specifically when he came in late at night, I accompanied you and Billy up to his room, and he was getting his stuff on bed and whatnot and hotel. He had brought some items with him that he was going to put in the auction. And I remember he had a colored photograph of him and Hulk Hogan together, and it was in a frame. And I remember looking at it going, man, I really want to bid for that. And the autograph on there that Hulk Hogan autographed to Billy Graham, it said, "To Billy, oh, now you know why we do what we do," something like that. And I thought
there was an inside comment for sure. Yeah.
Yes. That message certainly was inside.